You know, when we think about the poetry of World War I, our minds usually jump straight to the grim, muddy reality of the trenches. But before all of that, before that brutal truth really took hold, there was a completely different voice. A voice full of idealism, romance, and patriotic fire. And that voice belonged to a name that truly stands apart, Rupert Brooke.
Yeah, those words, they're just iconic, aren't they? Written way back in 1914, they basically became an anthem for a whole generation marching off to what they believed would be a short, glorious war. It just perfectly captured the spirit of a nation that was so sure about the honor of its cause.
So who was this guy, Rupert Brooke? Well, born in 1887, he was pretty much the poster boy for the golden youth of his time. He was famously handsome, incredibly smart, and a seriously gifted poet. He became this powerful symbol for all the young men heading off to fight, really embodying all the hope and, frankly, the innocence of the nation in those very early days of the war.
You have to remember, this was before the world really understood the true industrialized horror of modern warfare. And Brooke's poems, well, they gave voice to a very different vision. His work wasn't about mud or gas or barbed wire, nope. It was this glorified, almost chivalrous idea of what war was, all built on powerful themes of duty, noble sacrifice, and a deep, deep pride in England.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little. How did his poems actually build this powerful myth? Well, his most famous work was all published in one collection that really came to define this early, super optimistic phase of the war.
This poem right here is the absolute cornerstone of his 1915 collection, 1914, and other poems. It paints this incredibly calm, almost beautiful picture of dying for your country. In this poem, death isn't some tragic, awful end. It's a noble act. It's something that purifies the soldier and even enriches the foreign soil with a little piece of England, granting him a kind of peaceful immortality.
But it wasn't all just about glorious battle. This other beautiful poem shows a powerful longing for home. It paints this vivid, almost dreamlike picture of the English countryside, a peaceful, perfect world that stands in such sharp contrast to the chaos of war brewing in Europe. It really showed what he and so many others felt was worth fighting for.
So you see what he's doing here? When you put all these themes together, the glorious patriotism, the noble sacrifice, the nostalgia for this peaceful England, you get this incredibly powerful romantic vision. It's a vision of a country so perfect, so worthy of defending, that even dying for it becomes a beautiful thing.
And wow, did this vision resonate? It's hard to even describe how deeply Brooke's poetry connected with the British public. It just perfectly captured the mood of those early war years. This kind of tragic optimism that completely swept the nation, before the long casualty list started coming home and telling a very different story.
And the timing was just everything. This collection came out right at the start of the conflict. It's like it froze a very specific, fleeting moment in time, maybe the very last moment of innocence, before the horror and the disillusionment really began to set in. All right, but here is where the story takes a really sharp, almost unbelievable turn. There is this huge contrast between the poet's vision of noble combat and his own actual experience of the war.
It just makes you wonder, right? What exactly did he see in the trenches that led him write about war with so much idealism? What horrors of the Somme or Passchendaele shaped these famous poems about glorious sacrifice?
The answer is none. Rupert Brooke never saw a single moment of combat. He was on a ship on his way to the Gallipoli campaign when he was bitten by a mosquito. The bite got infected and he died of sepsis in April 1915. The poet who immortalized the noble death of a soldier died from a random, tragic illness nowhere near a battlefield.
And his story just brilliantly sets the stage for the massive shift that was about to happen in war poetry. You have Brooke's pure, untouched idealism on one side, and then you get the poets who came after him, men like Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon, who actually fought in the trenches. And their poetry, it wasn't about glory. It was about gas attacks, brutality, trauma, and the unspeakable reality of it all.
So if he never even experienced the war he's so famous for writing about, why is he still such an important figure? Well, in a really strange way, it's because of how he died. His death just cemented the myth. It froze him in time as this eternally young, handsome, idealistic soldier poet. Look, he remains essential.
Not because he wrote about the reality of war, but because he so perfectly captured the idea of war, right before that reality was truly understood by everyone. His poems are a time capsule of a generation's tragic optimism, and his mythic death became a symbol for a nation trying to process its own profound, staggering loss.
And ultimately, that's his real legacy. He is the voice from the very, very beginning of the story. His poetry is like a beautiful and heartbreaking prologue to the horrors that were about to unfold, representing the last breath of a world that was on the brink of unimaginable change.
And it leaves us with this much bigger, fascinating question. When you trace that line from Brooke's idealism all the way to Owen's brutal realism, you're literally watching a nation's entire mindset transform in real time. It just makes you wonder, how does art always manage to capture a society's journey through its hopes, its trauma, and its memories of conflict?